Hello everyone, I'm Skratch. Welcome to the channel. This is another Raid Shadow Legends video. Hope you guys are having an amazing day. Plarium announced not a very long time ago that the new Sylvan Watchers faction crypt will actually open in less than a month. So we have a few weeks to get prepared for it. Now, what exactly will happen with the current rewards that we have in Faction Wars? All these milestones will be getting pushed up a bit. Lydia, for example, won't be obtainable at 882 stars. You're gonna have to complete the next faction that is being added in order to collect Lydia. They will be adding some other rewards in between, hopefully something juicy like a couple of sacred shards or something like that, just to get something good out of it. Now, if you are very close to Lydia, I would probably suggest you to kind of like go the extra mile and try to complete the faction crypts before the new faction gets released. And you don't have much time left. If you're not close to it by any means, don't stress it then. Slowly you're gonna get it done. And in today's video, I want to talk about the best champions from the Sylvan Watchers faction, kind of like to get you guys prepared for it. And we have a lot of champion training tournaments, events coming up, especially with the new fusion. So you might be wondering, what champion should I build up? Should I start working on my Sylvan Watchers faction? Well, that's why we're here today, guys, to try and put up a strong team together for the Sylvan Watchers. And don't worry if you are lacking any of the champions. We're gonna go over through quite a few of them. Now, the main thing that you wanna prioritize when you are picking your champions for faction wars is to bring in multiple roles from one champion. Like, to don't be only support, right? To don't be only a debuffer. To don't be only a damage dealer. You kind of like wanna mix a few things for each one of the champions. And actually, the Sylvan Watchers are doing a great job at kind of like offering you more than just one thing per champion, allowing you to create a pretty strong team straight off the back. Now, one thing that we don't know so far about faction wars and the new faction crypt is what sort of bosses are we going to have in this crypt. So we do have 5 different bosses all around, guys, and this one right here that we have on the dwarfs on stage 21, the purple one, or the red one actually, sorry, will be the most annoying one because that's the one that ignores defense. So that's the one that can easily one-shot some of your champions. Is a bit harder to control because whenever you're dealing damage onto that boss, he's gonna gain perimeter. Now I'm curious if they are actually going to put that boss for stage 21 on the Sylvan Watchers as well. They've done it on the Shadowkins. So I'm super curious to see, considering that that is most probably the hardest boss. I would expect them to try and do something like that. But that's fine because, how I mentioned, you do have plenty of support in here. Now, if you're really lacking a lot of champions, don't really stress about it so much because you still have time to pull champions and you don't want to complete the faction straight off the back directly, especially if you're lacking champions, you know? So it's going to be a work in progress. But starting with support champions, yeah, it's pretty obvious. We have Elva, which is very strong. She was a guaranteed legendary. She can revive, she can give us increased speed, cleanse, block debuffs, continuous heal, the increased speed aura for all battles. Great option. Again, the Void legendary, Clydna, very nice option too for faction wars. Attacks one enemy, has a chance to sleep, a bit of crowd control. Right here you have a Leech, you have decreased speed, you have a heal on all your team too. The A3 block debuffs and revive on that. The passive, which has a chance to block the incoming damage to this champion. So again, a very strong support champion. And probably if you have an Elva, you don't really have to worry about it because she's gonna carry your team. Clydna is not gonna be as easy because revive on that is gonna be harder to kind of like put in the mix there, but it's still doable, right? Then we have King Yalkabar, a fairly decent champion. I wouldn't stress with him too much, but the good thing is that he brings in the shield, he brings in continuous heal, a cleanse, so all these things can actually be very beneficial, especially if we are running against bosses that drop in a lot of debuffs, you know. So he can play a pretty impactful role as a support champion. Definitely not a champion to kind of like sleep on if you have one available. I wouldn't necessarily prioritize him as my main support if I wouldn't have Elva or a Kleina. Honestly, I would probably lean towards some of the epics, which I'm gonna kind of like discuss in a second. In terms of other support, we have Ruella was a pass fusion as well, and while she's not really bringing that much for faction wars, she can help us quite a bit. So with the A1 you have decreased speed. This can be helpful on the bosses to allow you to rotate a bit faster and kind of like recover if needed, or if you need to kind of like drop in a lot of damage on the boss, depending on which one of the bosses we have. This will actually give you the upper hand. We're getting a bit of a heal with the A2, which is very helpful as well. Now, the thing is, the heal from here is based on the ally's max HP, not over her own. So each one of the heal won't be as powerful. Increases the duration of all ally buffs by 1 turn, which can be pretty helpful. Fills the thermometer of all allies by 30%. Increased resistance. Increased resistance won't be as impactful as you might think in faction wars, because some of the bosses have different debuffs that cannot be resisted. So even if you have very high resistance, it's not really gonna be helpful all around. Some bosses can be countered by resistance, but not everything, you know. And the passive, you're just basically getting a bit of continuous heal. She can be helpful as a bit of an extra heal, thermometer boost and stuff. So definitely don't sleep on her if you have her. Ruark is definitely not an amazing champion. You can run him for decreased attack, the continuous heal, and the taunt, which taunt is not very powerful. It's not like provoke. So you're gonna have to kind of like taunt the right champion, taunt maybe their support or something like that, that will actually allow you to kind of like make sure everything stays under control. Having the decreased attack is great, and I feel like you will need a decreased attack if the boss will be the one that ignores defense, because it does a lot of damage, you know. So that's a pretty decent one. Eilil can be a pretty good DPS if you have him available, of course. I start with the legendaries just to quickly get him off the list, guys, because I don't want to prioritize the legendaries as much. It's kind of like a no-brainer. If you have one of the legendaries, most probably you will try to use him in the faction creeps, because hey, what else you're gonna do with a champion, right? But Eilil can be a decent damage dealer. Will do all this job, you know, remove the buffs if they have them on, and then drop some different debuffs on the targets. Pretty good. The crit rate aura will help you as well if you're struggling with that. And you have the last legendary, which is the pay to win champion, and yeah, she can be used as well as a DPS debuffer, HP burn, and a couple of different things, a bit of thermometer manipulation and stuff. So it's pretty interesting if you have her available. But if you have her available, probably you're a bit of a kraken, so you don't really need to stress about faction wars whatsoever. Now, when we are talking about support, epic champions, when we are talking about rare champions as support, unfortunately, we only have 3 rare champions at the moment, okay? Now, it doesn't mean that we cannot really play around with them. You can definitely do so. In terms of support, Margrave is fairly decent, okay? So you're getting a continuous heal, you're getting a provoke right here, reflect damage, and ally protection, plus increased defense. Now, ally protection is one of the best counters against the boss that ignores defense, because if you are mitigating some of the damage, you won't get one-shotted, basically. So this is going to be very helpful if you're struggling on that boss, but I find it pretty hard to recommend you to invest in any of these 3 rare champions at the moment, considering that you won't be able to use them anywhere else. And I'm pretty sure they will be adding new champions this month. Like, I'm so convinced that we're going to get some new champions for this faction in the next few days, if not in the next few days, definitely before the faction gets released. Now, more support in terms of epics, right? So we covered the rare champion that can help you a bit. We have one reviver in here as well, and this is Wyrenon. Hopefully I said her name right. I'm not even 100% sure. With A1, decrease attack. This is gonna be great, right? So you want to have a bit of accuracy. You're getting increased speed. You're getting thermometer increase on all your team on a 4-turn cooldown, and then you have revives a dead ally with 50% HP and 30% thermometer. Then you're getting a bit of continuous heal, and you have a speed aura for faction creeps, 20%. So this might be one of your best bets in terms of revivers, the most accessible reviver that this faction will actually offer. Now, these champions are fairly new, so it's pretty hard to kind of like get them, honestly. There's so many different epics in the game, you know. Talking about other champions that we had as guaranteed, Nia. She is definitely one of the best support champions that you will have for this faction. Not only that she plays multiple roles, that she allows you to bring quite a few different things to the fight, but she's just very, very powerful all around. So AoE, decrease speed, she would be amazing on a stun set to give you a lot of crowd control for the waves. So that's probably how I would attempt to build the champion if I would need crowd control on the waves. You have the decrease speed, a stun set on her, and she's gonna do wonders. The A2, you're getting a cleanse on a target ally, you're getting the heal, you're getting the decreased cooldowns as well, which will allow you to either constantly heal the same ally if you're struggling at a boss, you know, and decrease the cooldowns of the skill that will allow you in a way or another to control the boss, either thermimeter manipulation, either you're needing decreased attack or something like that, and that will actually allow you to constantly keep your team alive. Or maybe you're doing it to the reviver to make sure you're able to revive a dead ally all the time, you know. Then the ally protection and the strengthen is what's going to be a massive carry. This is on a 3-turn cooldown, guys, so unlike the rare champion that you have available, White Dryad Nia, she will actually be very powerful for this, especially if the boss is gonna ignore defense. So definitely a champion that if by any chance you don't have her leveled up just yet, it's time to pull her out of the vault and start cracking on her. Like, she's just an amazing champion all around, and you're gonna have a lot of utility out of this champion just for general content in the game, you know. And whenever this champion is heals each ally except this champion by 20%. So you can either put her on a immortal set, you can put her on a regeneration if you're struggling with the healing for the team, and drop the stun set like that, and that will be actually very nice. So the one champion that I would instantly pick in the team for myself will be White Dryad Nia. Let's imagine I don't have, for example, Elva, so I will get White Dryad Nia in my team. Then I covered my support champions, right? Like right here, you kind of like have a couple more. Like you have Duedan. He kind of like can be support. He can be debuffer, you know, kind of like play multiple roles. So with the A1, has a chance to remove a debuff from all allies, kind of like a Doom Priest passive, but it's a skill. With the A2, places a shield on all allies for 2 turns, increases the duration of all ally buffs, which is great. The shield will help to survive quite a bit. And then he's doing all these buffs on himself. So the taunt could potentially help you a bit. How I mentioned, to kind of like control specific enemies is not as powerful as the provoke debuff, so I wouldn't rely on it as much, you know. But it's another champion that can play the role of a support, basically. Get a bit of shield from there, you know. Now I've picked my support, right? We have Nia in my team. I'm gonna go with no reviver at the moment, so I'm gonna play with Nia. Then the next thing that you really gotta bring in the team is having debuffers, having damage, right? So I'm gonna try to look for champions that will bring debuffs and will bring some sort of damage or some sort of thermimeter manipulation or anything like that, you know. So probably my next pick in the team will be Daity, just for the simple fact that he brings damage and he brings the defense down, so that kind of like covers us with debuffs and damage at the same time. So with the A1, has a chance of removing a random buff from the target and an extra chance to grant an extra turn. So if you have a Paragon in there placing Unkillable on himself, he's gonna do the job with the A1. Attacks all enemies, defense down. If you land defense down on everyone, he's gonna gain an extra turn. And then increases attack, increases accuracy, grants extra turn, which will allow him to deal pretty solid damage actually. Just start with this, move to defense down, and do a lot of damage as well. So this is a pretty good debuffer slash DPS champion for Faction Crypts. Probably the best that they actually have to offer in here. Then Cryodon, if you have him available, another great DPS champion and crowd control. Not so much as DPS because he's not doing so much raw damage or stuff like that. But as crowd control and thermimeter manipulation, I feel like he's definitely gonna have a very impactful role. With the A1, he has a chance to land the freeze, attacks one enemy 3 times. The A2 attacks all enemies, and he has a 65% chance to land the freeze debuff for 1 turn. So this again can be very, very helpful as a crowd control. And you are gaining increased speed buff on all allies for 2 turns and fills the thermometer by 15%. The passive fills the champion's thermometer by 5% for each freeze debuff placed by this champion. This can actually be pretty cool, like allowing the champion to rotate more often and do more work for your team, basically, you know. So at the moment, I'm sticking with Nia, I'm sticking with Daity. So I'm looking for more champions that could potentially kind of like help my team quite a bit, right? Like we wanna get some more value. So I feel like Kellen would be the next champion that I would be bringing in my team. Not only because he's dealing damage, but he's gonna bring other things to the team as well. So we have Weaken with A1. With the A2, attacks 1 enemy 2 times. The first hit will have a 100% chance of decreasing the target's thermometer by 50%. The second hit has a 100% chance of decreasing the speed for 2 turns and places a perfect veil buff on this champion for 2 turns. Now, when we want to control bosses, and this will be very beneficial for every single one of the bosses, guys. That's why this is my 3rd champion that I will bring in my team. Kellen the Shrike. This is a lot of utility in this skill alone, so definitely he's gonna bring a lot of value. Not to mention, we do have an AoE attack as well with the A3, and the damage increases by 5% for each debuff on the target. The passive will ignore shield buffs when attacking under a perfect veil. Quite often you might find champions that shield in faction wars on the waves, so this will actually be pretty beneficial. But this skill right here is what makes this champion great. The A2, thermometer manipulation, decreased speed will actually be massive. So at the moment, these 3 are my champions. Now, I'm looking to have a bit of a more damage in here, maybe a bit of more thermometer manipulation and things. So I'm gonna go and bring in Ruella as the next champion. And not only that she will bring damage, she doesn't hit extremely hard, like raw damage. She doesn't have tons of AoE attacks or anything like that. But I'm gonna show you in a second why I like her. Attacks 1 enemy 3 times. Each critical hit has a 100% chance of stealing 5% of the target's thermometer. Again, this will be super powerful against bosses. The A2 attacks 1 enemy 3 times. Each hit has a chance to land a decrease defense, weaken, and decrease speed debuff for 2 turns. This is gonna land pretty much all the time when you use the skill, which is great. You wanna have all this in, you know. And then fills the thermometer of all allies by 20% and places a 30% increased crit rate buff on all allies for 2 turns. And you have an accuracy aura for dungeons, which is not gonna be helpful. Now, some of you guys might not have Kellen available, might have Ruella, so definitely try to include one of these 2 champions in your team. So that would be, so far at the moment, what I would keep in the team. Then I do need to bring some sort of support, right? Like I want to have a bit of extra support in there. So probably my next pick would be Duedan instead, just because we do have a chance to cleanse with the A1. The bosses tend to debuff quite a bit, and if this champion will take a lot of turns with the A1 will actually help us quite a bit. I would probably put this champion in Relentless if I would go for Faction Wars, just because of the A1. Fully booked, a 60% chance of removing 1 random debuff from all allies. You know, the more turns he takes, the better. So that would be pretty good. Plus the shield that he brings in will actually help my Nia to survive in case if she's tanking a lot of hits from bosses and things. So that would probably be my team, guys. I would use Nia, Daity, Ruella, Kellen, and Duedan. Ornn, for example, again, is a pretty good support champion that can do a lot of work, and probably he will be able to solo quite a few waves. But then again, you're not going to get the 3 stars, you know. Attacks 1 enemy 2 times, you're landing the poisons. With the A2 again, attacks 1 enemy 2 times. Each hit activates the poisons and attacks all enemies. places 2 poisons, poison sensitivity, and heals the champion, right? So him on a regen set can do a massive carry, but unfortunately for Faction Wars, unlike dungeons, you need to get the 3 stars in order to complete the milestones and collect the rewards, you know? So Priest on, again, can be put in the team as an extra damage dealer, for example, you know? Like, he will be great against bosses, just to melt bosses with the poisons and the poison activation, and for the waves as well, you know? Then we do have Lockwayne, which is a decent damage dealer as well. A chance to steal a random buff, attacks all enemies, removes the Veil or Perfect Veil, has a chance to remove a buff from all enemies. That's what's great on the champion, the chance to remove a buff. Then attacks one enemy, will ignore shield buffs, and resets the cooldowns of this skill if he kills an enemy, which could potentially be pretty nice. The passive increases the accuracy by 10 for each buff on each enemy. So if you don't have, for example, a Mistrider Daity, you're lacking damage, Lockwayne can definitely be a pretty solid damage. And I feel like the only couple of epics we haven't covered from here would be Enna. I feel like this one right here will be one of the weakest DPS champions out of all the Crypt. I'm not sure about multipliers, but just kind of like trying to bring in multiple things, I don't feel like he's going to be that great. Yes, you do have defense down on a single target from here. Not going to be very impactful on the waves. Not going to be as impactful as you might think. Yes, it can benefit you on the boss to have that. Then you have attacks 3 times at random. Each hit increases the duration of a random debuff on the target by 1 turn. And attacks all enemies and a 100% chance to land the Leech. Now, one thing to keep in mind. Leech won't be as powerful as in clan boss. Won't be as powerful as in dungeons when you are at bosses, because the total HP on a faction Crypt boss, for example, is not as high. So War Master, Giant Slayer hits are barely making any damage. So your return in terms of healing will be minimal. So do not count on Leech as your main source of healing for faction Crypts, because it's not going to be as impactful as you might think, you know? It's not so similar like clan boss or the rest of the content, you know? Cormac, again, not a big fan of this champion. He doesn't really bring that much to the table. You do have the decreased speed on a single target. This can be good on the bosses, don't get me wrong. Then right here, attacks one enemy, the defense down on the target is nice, but again, single target, and then increases accuracy, increases crit rate, extra turn. So not such a big fan of the champion. Of course, if you are lacking other damage dealers, use him, you know, like don't have any second thoughts whatsoever, because he will do the job. He's just not as powerful as the other ones that I just named. That's kind of like I try to go in an order what I would prefer to pick, what sort of things they are bringing to the team, except just raw damage, you know. And of course, you have the other two rare champions. You have Pathfinder Kate. I do find her pretty interesting as a crowd control champion, and this skill right here attacks all enemies, 50% chance of increasing the cooldown of a random skill on each target by 2 turns. Now, it's not the best source of crowd control out there, right? But if that's what you're struggling with, definitely consider in giving her a go. Maybe take her to level 50. It's gonna be a bit harder to keep alive. Her stats are miserable, so the bosses will easily destroy her. If you don't have a revival, again, will be pretty hard to make use of her skill. The good part is that if she kills an enemy, places a perfect veil buff on this champion for 1 turn whenever they kill the enemy, you know. So that's kind of like the good part about her. And this one right here, yes, increased speed buff on all allies, pretty nice. AoE attack could work on a stun set. Decrease attack, very nice. Is going to be important for bosses and even for waves. And then a veil buff on all allies except the champion, and a shield equal to this champion's HP, you know. Decreases the damage. So all around, this is a pretty strong rare champion that you could use. But again, if you're building these rares, you're not really gonna do much with them. Like, this one will definitely be useful in secret rooms in the Doom Tower for use spirit rare champions only, you know. Like, you're gonna be able to use him in that faction Crypt, which is pretty challenging, you know. But other than that, you don't really have much of a use for them, you know. So just in case, if you guys and kind of like missed the point, lost it in translation. Get some good support in, get a good debuffer in there, get a champion that manipulates a bit the turn meter, and then focus on damage, because if you're lacking damage, you're not going to be able to kill the enemies fast enough, the boss fast enough, and he might create you issues. But that was all for this video, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments down below what will be your Sylvan Watcher's team once the crypts open. Much love, and I'll catch you all soon in the next video. Peace.